Cord broken, Book of Baruch, 6:43. When the Attic maidens danced as bears at the Brauronia and the Alpha Rho Kappa Tau Epsilon Iota Alpha of Artemis, it was a mode of making them individually marriageable, and the mode was evidently in accordance with the totemic ritual as in the mysteries of Belit. This will also explain the crave for human blood, which was attributed to the goddess, on the ground that the blood was that of the virgins. Thus consecrated by the most ancient practice of promiscuity, or all for all. In various ways the totemic or tribal organization fought hard and long against the woman becoming private property. The males considered, with Prutham, that property was robbery, and individual ownership in marriage had many modifications in the course of being eventually established. In the south of Malayalam a married woman is permitted to have 12 other husbands as lovers, besides the man to whom she is legally bound, but she must play the game fairly and not exceed the number allowed. With the Eskimo or Inuits the primitive, page 85, communal marriage still obtains in spite of their being monogamists in appearance. As M. Reclus remarks, adultery is a daily escapade with the women as well as the men. The members of the marital association keep running accounts and open large credits with each other. When the wind blows from the south every woman is out on the rampage after other men, but each wife must lawfully couple with the man to whom the husband would willingly have lent her, and who will lend his own wife in return. They hold that all were made for all. The sin against nature is for the lawful wife to seek connubium with a bachelor, who can make no return in kind to the husband. Reclus, Primitive Folk, English translation, page 32. Ross, Second Voyage, the custom is African. Sir Harry Johnston mentions a curious mode of weighing out even-handed justice in cases of adultery. Amongst the Nyanja, if a man is caught in the act he is compelled to get another man as substitute to cohabit with his wife before he can return to her. He must also pay his substitute for this service 4 yards of cloth, or make an equivalent present, otherwise the substitute can claim and carry off the wife as his own property. It was not the men alone who resisted the change. According to Petherick, the mother of the bride, among the Hassanieh Arabs, protests against binding her daughter to a due observance of that chastity which matrimony is expected to command for more than 2 days in the week at a time. Petherick, J., Egypt, the Sudan, and Central Africa, various ways of limiting the primitive promiscuity, and at the same time of securing elasticity in the marriage tie, might be cited. For example, the Spaniards found a curious custom current in Lancerota. A woman there had several husbands, but a husband was considered as such only during a lunar revolution. Spencer, Data, 298, thus one woman was limited to one man for a month, and the marital relations were changeable with the moon. That which was once the woman's right is still sought for as a privilege when the Estonian women claim to repeat the rites of the ancient Saturnalia, such as dancing in a state of nudity at the festival of spring. With us the matriarchate still survives on Friday, the Woman's Day, and in February, the month in which the women claim the right to choose their husbands every leap year. On certain festive occasions there is a total or partial return to the pre-eval status of the sexes. This return occurs at the phallic festival or primitive agape. In a corroboree of the Arenta, which lasts for 10 days or a fortnight at a time, there is a partial return to promiscuity, or the sexual license which the natives say was a practice of the Alcharinga, or old times. Nt. page 96 to 101, this does not stand alone. According to the report of Mr. Kuhn in Kamala Roy and Kernai, by L. Fison and A. W. Howitt, pages 285 to 287, the men of the Tura tribe were not debarred from sexual intercourse with women of their own totem in the orgies of the Grand Corroboree. This shows the same return to utter promiscuity for the time being as in all other celebrations of the phallic festival when the only law was that of all for all. It was a return pro tem to the most ancient usage, which is represented in mythology by the old first mother in connubium with her own sons. The primitive customs were established as a means, page 86, of memorizing that which could not otherwise be registered. Thus the Arenta danced the history of their descent from the time when the race was not divided by the lizard. And thus the state of promiscuous intercourse was repeated in the religious mysteries, including those of the Christian Church. According to a Latin myth, the Saturnalia of ancient Rome was held in commemoration of the sexual promiscuity that once obtained. Such customs constituted the record of prehistoric if not primitive man. That is why their performance is so permanent and so universal. A change in the human descent from the motherhood to the fatherhood is apparent in the Egyptian mythology as early as the time of Ptah, the father of Atum Ra. The mother, human or divine, was primordial. Next came the sisters. Then the brothers, the same in mythology as in totemism. Previous to the dynasty of Ptah there were 7 brothers born of the sevenfold motherhood, when there was as yet no father individualized. 6 of these were prehuman, for instance, Sut the male hippopotamus, Sebek the crocodile, Shu the lion, Hapi the ape, Apuit the jackal, Kabsenyef the hawk, and 1 the elder. Horus was human, as the child of Isis, the blood mother. The 7 souls are commonly reckoned as 6 plus I. The 6 are pre-anthropomorphic. They were powers of the elements represented by the zootypes, such as the soul of earth that was imaged by the beast of earth, the soul of water by the crocodile, the soul of breathing force by the lion, the soul of fire by the ape, the soul of vegetation by the serpent. The 7th soul was human. This was imaged in child Horus, who became the chief of the 7 and leader of the company. The Dog Rib Indians preserve a tradition, which is also repeated along the Pacific coast from Alaska to Oregon, that the ancient mother of the human race was a woman who was mated with a dog. The woman gave birth to 6 pups, which used to throw off their skins at will when they were alone, and play in human shape. This, in its quaint way, is another form of the mystery of the 6 as prehuman souls, which culminated in the 7th soul that attained the human status together with the anthropomorphic type. In the Mangan Mutian, at the root of all beginning, there are 2 women, called the mother and her daughter. This beginning was at the bottom of the hollow coconut shell called Avaki. Vari is the name of the mythical Great Mother. Machua is the daughter. Her name, which signifies stick by parent, is knowingly natural. Another point. She is the last product of the Great Mother, the only female child, and is called her support, her beloved child. These 2 are the ground and basis of a world in 6 divisions. Now, there came a time in Egypt when the brothers, who had previously been the children of the mother, were called the sons of Ptah, and all their powers were comprehended in the unity of the God, who was portrayed as both father and mother in one person. In the texts, Ptah is called the husband of his mother, which shows the polygamous patriarch who afterwards entered the monogamic state with Sekhet Mer Ptah for his single consort. Maspero, The Dawn of Civilization, page 106. Note, English translator, it has been previously, page 87, shown that the custom of kuvad was a dramatic mode of affiliating the offspring to the father which had previously derived its descent from the mother. Natural Genesis, it is certain that in this the male impersonates the mother because he acts as if in gestation with the child and sometimes undergoes a fictitious parturition. But the supreme peculiarity of this primitive mystery is that the male parent not only acts the part of the mother, but also of the father, both parents in one person. It is in this sense only that Sut, who was the firstborn of the 7, is called in later language a father of the gods. Writ, ch. 8, in Akkad or Babylonia, the group of 7 males is divided into Ea as a father with his 6 sons. It is the same among the Zuni Indians, whose fetish deities are 7 in number, that is 6, with a form of God the Father as the Supreme One. These were the rulers of the 6 regions or mountains, with Po Shai and Kia in the center as the head over all. A soul of life in man, animal, and vegetable was at one time held to be derived by the transformation and embodiment of some external force in animal guise. Hence came the anima or soul of wind that was humanized in breathing, whether as the soul of man or animal. At length it was observed that a human soul of flesh was formed or embodied in the mother blood, as it was written in the secret book of nature. This was the earliest soul of man that was discreted from the external elements of life, which form the rudimentary and prehuman beings who are to be met with in the legends of the Aborigines the whole world over. These were also known to the Semites as pre-Adamic people, the Admu, the kings of Edom. Which brings us back to the Egyptian root of the matter in the word Tum or Tem. Tem, we repeat, signifies mankind, mortals, created persons, which were created mystically from the soul of Adam in Hebrew, or Adam in Egyptian, the earlier form of which name in the ritual is Tum. the race of Tum, Adam, or Admu. Identify their origin in nature, with the soul of blood by the Adamic name. And, sociologically, the creation of man qua man was a birth of totemism. The creation of man in the Egyptian Genesis is late. When measured by the mythology, Adam represents the primal being who was the earliest evolved as perfect man. As sun god he is designated Ra in his first sovereignty, the solar mythos being last of all. This, with Adam as supreme god in the human likeness, was preceded by the lunar and the stellar mythos, by the Mother Earth and all her elemental powers. We shall frequently find the time gauge of the past in Egypt when it is nowhere else recoverable on earth. The subject of the Hebrew beginnings is fundamentally the same, as will be seen when we can reach the root. It is the evolution of the human race from the pre-human conditions that were actual in nature and not, as alleged, the abortions of a false belief. This was the subject dramatized, danced and taught in all the mysteries of gesture language and totemic ceremonies by means of which the unwritten past was commemorated and indurated by ceaseless repetition of the acted drama. The so-called legends of creation would be more correctly termed, page 88, the legend of human evolution, although in a different sense from that of Darwinian development. As Semite, they came to us in the latest and least genuine form, with no clue to any true interpretation. In a Maori myth, man was created by the god Tiki from red clay. This he kneaded with his own blood, or with red water from the swamps. Man is Adam in Egyptian, Admu in Assyrian, Adam in Hebrew, and this was the creation of the human being discriminated from the preliminary and pre-human beings of the mythos and the Mershin. In legendary lore, it was the soul of blood distinguished from the earlier souls or forces of the external elements, which were the six preceding the human soul as supreme one. The origins in mythology are very natural underneath the mask. Indeed, they are 100-fold more natural than the pretended explanations of their modern misinterpreters. Primitive naturalists had only the light of nature for guidance, and by this they went. The creation of man, or, as the earlier versions have it, of men and women, was mystical in one sense, in another it is totemic. As before said, the history of the race might be roughly divided into pre-totemic and totemic, pre-human and human. This, when reflected in the mirror of Egyptian mythology, is pre-Atumic. Or, in the Semitic version, pre-Adamic and Adamic. The same legend of a later origin for mankind is also Mexican. When there were no human beings on the earth, certain of the lower powers solicited help from the supreme gods in the work of creation, or of a re-beginning. They are instructed to collect the remains of the former race, and these will be vivified by the blood of the gods. In this version the god who plays the part of Adam, or Belus procures a bone from the burial place, and on this the gods drop the blood drawn from their own bodies. Whereupon there is a new creation, namely, that of mankind. Mendieta, Hist. Eccle. Indiana, page 77, here, as elsewhere, the human soul of blood is derived from source as male instead of from the earlier motherhood. So in the book of Genesis the second creation of Adam is based upon the bone called a rib which is extracted from the male. It is in Adam, the son of Ptah, that man was perfected. In him the matriarchate is completely superseded by the father right or derivation from the fatherhood. Now the change in the human descent from the mother blood to the father blood is obviously commemorated in the mysteries or ceremonial rites of the Arenta. In the operation of young man making two modes of cutting are performed upon the boy by which he becomes a man and a tribal father. The first of these is commonly known as circumcision, or Lartna, by the Arenta. The other ceremony of initiation, which comes later, is the rite of subincision called Ariltha. The second cutting is necessary for the completion of the perfect man. Indeed, some of the more stalwart young men undergo the cruel rite a second or even a third time, nt. Page 257, to prove their manhood. With this trial test the youth becomes a man, a fathership is founded, and, as certain customs show, the motherhood is in a measure cast off at the time or typically superseded by the fatherhood. Nature led the way for the opening rite performed upon the female, therefore we conclude that this preceded the operation performed upon the men, and we, page 89, suggest that this was a custom established, like that of Kuvad, in the course of commemorating the change from the matriarchate to the father rite. The rite is inter-African. It is universally practiced by the Fan, or Fang, tribes. An uncircumcised native is not considered as a man either for fighting, working, or inheriting, but is regarded as a nonentity and not allowed to marry. The rite proves the reality of manhood. We have previously traced the custom of kuvad to ptah, and now propose to trace the rite of ariltha or subincision to the full-formed father Adam, who was his son. When the Aranta perform the rite of subincision, which follows that of the primary operation, a slit is cut in the penis right down to the root. The natives have no idea as to the origin of the practice. NT, page 263, but as the practice proves, it is performed as an assertion of manhood, and is a mode of making the boy into a man, or creating man. Now, at this time it was customary to cast the motherhood aside by some significant action, that is at the time when the fathership is established in the initiation ceremony, and in the Aranta rite of subincision. The operating Mura first of all cuts out an oval-shaped piece of skin, from the male member, which he flings away. Page 257, the oval shape is an emblem of the female all the world over, and this we take to be another mode of rejecting the mother and of attributing begettal to the father, as it was attributed in the creation by Adam Ra, who was both male and female, as the one all-parent. The human soul was preceded by the elemental forces of external nature which were typified in a tradition that is universal. The soul that followed these as human was then born of blood, at first of mother blood, the blood of Isis, which was followed by a creation from the father blood. In the Babylonian legend concerning the generation of mankind attributed to Oannes by Berissos, the beginning is with hideous beings in the abyss, which are described as human figures mixed with the shapes of beasts. The person who was supposed to have presided over them was a woman named Amaroka. This is the great mother who at first was Mother Earth. Belus came and cut the woman asunder, which in totemism is the dividing of the one woman, or the type in two. At the same time he destroyed the animals in the abyss. Thus the prehuman period was succeeded by the matriarchate and the two female Ungambicula, who in the Aranta tradition cut and carved the rudimentary creatures into totemic men and women. Then Belus the deity cut off his own head, upon which the other gods mixed the blood with the earth, and from thence men were formed. Thus the source of life, or a soul of blood, was changed from the female to the male deity, who in the Egyptian theology is Adam Ra, or Tum, the image of created man, or of man who was created from the soul of blood that is at first female and afterwards was fathered on the male. This creation of man or Tum is represented in the Book of the Dead, ch. 17. The god, as father, takes the mother's place. The matriarchate terminates in the mythology of Egypt. Tum is described as giving birth to Hu and Sa, as the children of him who now unites the father with the mother as divinity in one person. Page 90, who denotes matter, Sa, or Ka, signifies spirit. This creation, then, is from blood and spirit. The double primitive essence first assigned to Ptah. The change from the mother blood to the father source is the same in the Kamite legend as in the Semitic version, but the modus operandi was different. Belus produces the blood by cutting off his own head, whereas in the ritual Father Adam draws the blood from the genitalia of a divine being who is both male and female blended in the formation of the father-mother, from whom the soul of blood was now derivable. The drops of blood are described as issuing from the person of Adam when he performed the rite of subincision or of mutilation on himself in the generation now attributed to the solar deity, considered to be male as well as female, or, finally, male instead of female. Thus the Aranta are still performing a blood covenant in the rite of Ariltha on the male, which is attributed to Adam Ra in the Egyptian mythos and by which he demonstrates the parentage of the children Hu and Sa, in the course of changing the descent from the matriarchate to the patriarchate. The primitive essence of human life was blood derived from the female source, with nature herself for the witness. In the later biology it was derived from the double primitive essence of Ptah that was continued in Adam and his two children Hu and Sa. Thus the basis of being was shifted from the mother blood to that of blood and spirit assigned to the fatherhood. From the cutting of the male member now attributed to Adam Ra we infer that the rite of circumcision and of subincision was a mode of showing the derivation from the human father and supersession of the motherhood, and that in the Aranta double cutting the figure of the female was added to the member of the male. Nor is this suggestion without corroboration. In his ethnological studies, page 180, Dr. Roth explains that in the Pitta Pitta and cognate Bulia dialects the term meko mero denotes the man with a vulva, which shows that the oval slit was cut upon the penis as a figure of the female and a mode of assuming the motherhood. In the Hebrew book of Genesis, this carving of the female figure on the person of the male, in the second creation, has been given the legendary form of cutting out the woman from the body of the male. Adam is thus imaged in the likeness of the Bayan parent. The foundation of Jewish monotheism was laid in the blood of the new covenant, which followed the cult of the female. It is noticeable that when the Jewish child is circumcised, it is said of him that he is made to enter into the covenant of Abraham, that is, of the great father in Israel. Moreover, the man who stands sponsor as the godfather is called the master of the covenant. Godwin, Moses, and Aaron, page 216. This may possibly explain the recircumcising of the children of Israel. If, as the history asserts, they dedicated to the female in the earlier time and were afterwards circumcised in a covenant made with the deity as God the Father, recircumcising would be a means of denoting a change in the rite, when the people were circumcised on the hill of foreskins. And this is the cause why Joshua did circumcise Joshua, ch. v. 2,4. The two covenants would thus tally with the two forms of the ceremony performed in first circumcision by the Arenta and in subincision, which is recircumcising in, page 91, the rites of the same people. Thus, there were two covenants, one sealed in the blood of the female, one in the blood of the male, and both were applied to the deity according to the sex. This mode of affiliation to the male deity is likewise obvious in the legend of the Guatemalans, who besought the Quiche god Tohil to favor them with the element of fire. This he gave them on condition that they united themselves to him by drawing blood beneath the girdle. Bancroft, v. 547, that is by drawing it from the membrum virile in a covenant of blood. When they did this, they received the fire from heaven, which was derived direct from God the Father as begetter, who was Atum Ra in Egypt, and God the Father in spirit as well as in flesh and blood. The cause of a mystical relationship that was recognized between man and the animals may now be traced on grounds less lofty than that of the supposed divine incarnations, and more natural than that of an animistic interfusing, which led to a confusion of identity and personality. The animals were first recognized as powers in themselves, but they were also adopted as the living visible symbols of elemental powers that were superior to the human as a means of representing natural phenomena. They were further adopted into the human family as totemic types with religious rites that gave them all the sanctity of the blood covenant and made them typically of one flesh with the human brothers. Thus they were doubly adopted, and this led to their becoming later living fetishes as the naturalized representatives of superhuman powers, though not as the direct object of human worship. The life tie assumed between totemic man and the totemic animal or zootype was consciously assumed, and we can perceive by what process and on what ground the assumption was made. The zootype being adopted as a badge of distinction, the primeval coat of arms, it was a custom for the human beings to enter into a brotherhood of blood. That is, the men who were not born of the same mother, or of two sisters, could extend the natural tie of blood by a typical right to others who were born of different mothers. In this way, the larger kin, clan, or tribe was formed on the basis of brotherhood under some totemic sign. Now if the animal becomes of kin to the human brother by virtue of a covenant intentionally made in the blood of both, that proves the kinship did not exist before. The relationship did not spring from any root in nature, or any false belief, but was ordained for the purpose, and is consequently limited to the particular beast and brotherhood. The bull is only kinsman to those whom he serves as a totem, an image of the ancestor and a type of the fraternity. So is it with all the other zootypes which had been employed from before the time when the individual fatherhood was known. There is no necessary confusion of identity. If men had abstained from eating the animals on the ground of kinship and intercommunion of nature, because of a confusion or identification of themselves with the beasts, they ought to have abstained from eating any, whereas they ate them all in turn, exceptions being made solely on the artificial ground of the totemic motherhood or brotherhood. The beast only became of the same flesh with the particular family because it had been adopted as their totem, ancestral animal, or foster brother of the blood covenant, and, page 92, not on account of any belief that they descended from this or the other non-human parent with a different progenitor for every separate group. Even in the human relationship, the being of one flesh shows that the system represents a later extension of the same family that first derived from one mother, the mode of extension being by the blending of blood, the rebirth, the drinking of the covenant, and eating of the fetish. But there was nothing promiscuous in this arrangement, which had been made on purpose to avoid promiscuity. They did eat, and did not tolerate being eaten by each other's totems. The relationship of men with beasts was most deliberately adopted. And the partnership was held with the strictest regard to the law of limited liability. Thus the blood brotherhood with the beasts was not based on any belief that they were on a level with the human being, nor on any mental confusion respecting their oneness of nature. At least it was not that which first rendered the animals taboo, or made them sacred to men. The typical character of the totemic animal was continued in various ways. Putting on the skin was a mode of assimilating the wearers to the powers beyond the beast, the superhuman forces which the animals represented in visible symbolry. Hence on going to battle they wore the skins and acted the role of the animals, birds, and reptiles, as their link of alliance with the superhuman nature powers that were overall. In like manner the god Shu, the warrior of the gods, the Egyptian Mars, does battle whilst wearing the superhuman power of the lioness on his head, and the moon god Tot-On is clothed with the power of the great ape, the ideograph of superhuman rage, when he fights against the demons of darkness by night on behalf of the suffering solar god. The mage or medicine man was wrapped up in the skin of the totemic beast for the purpose of communing with the spirits of the dead. Thus the transformer, and the transformation, the beast, the nature power, and the human ghost, got mixed up together. Such being the fact, it is easy to identify the foundation of the faith or ignorant belief that the medicine men had everywhere the power of transforming into wolves, hyenas, or tigers themselves, and that belief would cause the fear lest they should apply this power of metamorphosis to others, and ultimately create a belief in their power to transform human beings into animal shapes. The only veritable power of metamorphosis possessed by the ancient medicine men or mages, the witches or wizards, was that of inducing the condition of trance either in others or in themselves. This was and is a fact in nature, with which the primitive races were profoundly well acquainted. But those who are ignorant of such phenomena will be apt to mistake a surface appearance for the underlying reality, and must find it difficult, if not impossible, to distinguish between the true cause and a false belief. In the mysteries they changed place and shape and nature with the beasts of prey. They masked themselves in the skins of animals, reptiles, and birds, and sat at feast in those forms to devour the sacrifice when the totemic animal was slain for the Eucharistic rite. In that way they transformed and were said to change themselves into wolves or tigers, bears or crocodiles, to partake of this most primitive rite of transubstantiation. For it did, page 93, become a religious ceremony and a mode of entering into alliance and communion with the powers first apprehended as superhuman. When the ghastly, grim reality had passed into the legendary phase, we are told, as Plato tells us in the Republic, that those who ate of the human sacrifices offered to the wolf were transformed into wolves. Herodotus likewise relates that the Nurian wizards changed themselves into wolves for a few days once a year. First, the men who ate the flesh of the beast had changed themselves into wolves to eat it, according to the mode of masking. Next, it was said that by eating human flesh men would become werewolves, and lastly we have the werewolf as a man who is supposed to turn into the wolf on purpose to devour human flesh. Such are the tricks of typology, based on the primitive simplicity and the agnostic misinterpretation of later times when the mythos passes into the fable which deposits these types of the werewolf, the mermaid, the cockatrice, the serpent woman, the vampire, or the ghoul. In the latest phase of this transformation and transubstantiation it is the flesh of a supposed historical personage that is eaten and his blood that is drunk with the view of effecting a transformation into Horus or the Christ. It was a masquerade, but the men beneath the masks originally knew that they were acting in characters which they themselves had created. They wore skins in a typical transformation, they clothed or tattooed themselves with the signs of superhuman powers for a definite purpose, and not because they were returning to the condition of beasts from which they came, or expected to be saved by doing so. The masking and metamorphosis were but modes of the mysteries which included the mystery of trance. This primitive drama is not yet played out. The rites and doctrines are also to be identified at times as survivals in religious ritual. A startling illustration may be seen in a collection of English hymns, 1754, where these lines occur. The skin is likewise assumed by the Manes as their totem in the other life, different ideas being expressed by different kinds of skin. In the ritual, ch. 145, 31, the speaker who has just been baptized and anointed in process of regeneration when he transforms into the likeness of Horus the adult says he has the skin of a cat for his badge. The cat being a seer in the dark, the skin shows that he is no longer as the sightless Horus, but is the Horus with the second sight or beatific vision. With the Red Indians the skin of the totemic animal is placed at the side of a man who is dead or dying. It has also been stuffed at times and hung above the grave. The sign is the same for the dead man as for the dead animal. In each instance the skin means renewal, repetition, resurrection for another life. It has been a common custom for the dead to be buried in the skin of an animal, or in shoes or boots made from the skin of an animal. When Field Marshal the Duke of Wellington was buried in St. Paul's Cathedral, his boots were taken with him to the tomb, and in a sense he was buried in the skin. The significance of the skin is everywhere. Page 94, same. The slipper thrown after the newly wedded has the same meaning. Leather is made from the skin that denotes a renewal of life, and the act expresses the desire for the couple to be blessed with children. We have seen that the skin was equivalent to the animal as a type of renewal. This may afford us a clue to the custom of swearing oaths in making covenants on the skin, which would be like swearing by the future life, the hope of immortality, or by the eternal God. The earliest masks were formed of the head and skin of the totemic zootype. They also represented the invisible powers and finally became the heads of goddesses and gods. Masks were assumed when deities or spirits were represented in the mysteries. Thus, when a mask is put on by the Lenoit girl at the time of her first menstrualia, it denotes the presence of the nature power that reveals itself in this particular way as one of the mysteries of nature. The masks that were worn in certain mysteries were derived from the totemic zootypes, not from the human face. Hence their superhuman ugliness at times. These masks were used as portraits of the powers beyond the totem, and in the Lenoit mysteries, when the controlling spirit of a shaman was consulted, it was customary for the mask which represented the particular power invoked to be laid upon the shaman's face, and this mask was the skin of a victim that moment killed. Reclus, Primitive Folk. Eng. Tr. Page 87, a tribe of the hillmen near Darjeeling, in India, still retain the huge and hideous masks that represent the powers of nature. These are worn on the heads of priests when performing their elaborate religious rites. One of these images the god who looks after their spears and helps to drive them home, which shows the character of the masks as effigies of the nature powers is not forgotten. Paragraph and picture in the London Daily Mail, November 20, 1896, we have seen that the change made by the young girl into an animal at puberty was an origin of wearing the mask. This we assume to have been primary. Next, the practice was continued in matriarchal totemism. Then the customs of cutting and subincision, of wearing the skin, and of becoming the totemic beast, are applied to the male in the later mysteries of young man making. The totemic mysteries survived as eschatological in the Osirian religion. For example, when Horus the child, who was born of the mother only, under the divine matriarchate, makes his transformation into Horus the adult, who rises from the dead in Amenta, it is in the character of the anointed son of the Father. Anointing had then become the mode of showing the glory of the Father in the person of the Son. This was imaged with the holy oil upon the face of Horus. He who had been Horus the mortal in the flesh is now Horus in spirit, personalized and established as the anointed son. The typical anointed originated as the youth who was made a man of at the period of puberty, at which time the mother's child assumed the likeness of the father at the time of his totemic rebirth. The boy who was initiated into the mysteries of the Australian blacks was equally made the anointed in however primitive a fashion. When his probation terminated, and the stringent rules of his novitiate were relaxed, he was rubbed by an old man with fat that was taken from the totemic animal which was previously forbidden food. He, page 95, was not permitted to eat the female of any animal, nor the emu, that primordial mother totem, and he becomes a free man by having the fat of the animal smeared over his face. In fact, he is made a figure of the anointed. The Kurnai youth was made a free man of when anointed with fat. With the Adamanese, the bodies of the initiates are smeared over with the melted fat of pork and turtle in the ceremony of freeman making. H. Mann, Aboriginal inhabitants of the Andaman Islands, page 62, the boy was anointed when he made his change into the adult. Horus was anointed when he transformed from the mortal Horus to the Horus in spirit who rose again from the dead. And this anointing is still practiced at the extreme unction of the Roman Catholic rite that is administered when the dying are about to pass into the future life. This again correlates with, and is a survival of, the Aboriginal custom of placing a lump of fat in the mouth of the dead, by which act they were made into a form of the anointed preparatory to their resurrection. The mummies exhumed at Deir el-Bahari show that the faces had been painted and anointed for burial. The thick coats of color which they still bear are composed of ochre, carmine, or pounded brick, and anima. Fat, Maspero, Dawn of Civilization, English translation, page 54, note 5. These are also forms of the anointed one, who was made so by extreme unction more primitively. Applied to Osiris the Kharost mummy. The art of tattooing was likewise a totemic mode of sign language. This also corroborates the feminine origin of the signs, as when some of the aborigines such as the Ainu of Japan, and the Siberian Chukchi, only tattooed their women. Tattoo the women and not the men, is the command that was given in the Wisdom of Manihiki. The totem is sometimes tattooed on the person of the clansman, as it was by the Iroquois, the Ojibways, and other tribes of the Red Men. The Indians of San Juan Capistrano practiced a peculiar mode of tattoo. A figure of the personal totem was made of crushed herbs on the right arm of the novice. The paste was then set on fire and the figure of the totem burned into the flesh. At an earlier stage before the art of tattoo had been mastered, it was the custom to cut the flesh and raise cicatrices to pattern. This was especially practiced by the Australian Aborigines, and the tribal badges thus figured in the flesh were sometimes representations of the totem. Kamlaroy and Kurnai, by Fison and Howitt, page 66, Herbert Ward, who suffered the ceremony of establishing the covenant of blood brotherhood with Madam Wiki, a Bangala chief, in 1886, found that the skin of the Bangalis was tattooed or slashed and cicatrized in conformity with the totemic or tribal pattern, and that the patterns varied with the different tribes. Herbert Ward, 5 years with the Congo cannibals. 1890, the Eskimo indicate the particular Inuit tribe by different ways of trimming the hair, the women by the figures tattooed on their faces. The Aleuts at one time tattooed the figures of birds and fishes upon their skins. The women told Hall that they tattooed their faces as a mark of high distinction. It was so, as a sign of womanhood. The custom of tattooing the totemic token upon the body may be traced in Survival Through All, page 96, the later mysteries as a mode of identifying the initiates with their particular community. It is more than probable that the habit of the ancient Britons mentioned by Roman writers in staining their bodies with woad really refers to the system of totemic tattoo, as is indicated by the description of the pics found in Claudian's De Bello Getico, 24, pages 417 to 418, Feroque Notatus Porlegit examines Pictomorient Figuras. This is shown by an initial letter in the Book of Kells, a facsimile of which has been published by the Paleographical Society, containing the figure of a man quite naked, the body being covered all over with significant marks, just as the hieroglyphics are described by Boss, who affirms that in all their secret business the ancient Britons wrote with ciphers and figures of beasts made in manner of letters, which he identifies with the hieroglyphics of Egypt. Thus the woad-bedaubed men stigmatized as savages become the more intelligent illustrators of totemic times and customs who wore the stigmata of tattoo, and the pics or painted men are the men who carried the totemic marks either painted or branded on the living book of their own bodies. They were not merely dyeing their flesh for decoration, but making figures for use that could be read by others at sight. Even the raising of cicatrices in the flesh, which preceded tattooing, was an Egyptian custom. On the bas-reliefs of the temples at Philae and Ombos the bosoms of goddesses and queens are scored with long incisions which, starting from the circumference, united in the center round the nipple of the breast. In totemism the mother and motherhoods, the sisters and sisterhoods, the brothers and brotherhoods, The girl who transformed at puberty, the mother who was eaten as a sacrifice, the two women who were ancestresses, were all of them human, all of them actual, in the domain of natural fact. But when the same characters have been continued in mythology, they are superhuman. The mother and motherhoods, the sisters and sisterhoods, the brothers and brotherhoods, have been divinized. The realities of totemism have supplied the types to mythology as goddesses and gods that wear the heads or skins of beasts to denote their character. The mother, as human in totemism, was known as the water cow, and this became a type of the great mother in mythology and polytheism. But it is the type that was continued, not the human mother. The mother as first person in the human family was first person in the totemic sociology. Thence came the great mother in mythology who was fashioned in the matriarchal mold. But with this difference, it is the human mother underneath the mask in totemism. It is not the human mother who was divinized as the great provider in mythology. Totemism is not derived from mythology, but it has been mixed up with it because the same sign language was employed in both. Thus, the mother was human in the mask of totemism and is superhuman in the mask of mythography. This was the great mother who was the first person, as the only one, according to the Egyptian wisdom. They were not 7 human mothers or sisters who were constellated in the fields of heaven as 7 Hathors or 7 cows. These were the mothers of food, who were givers of life in the form, page 97, of the cow, when the 7 stars in Ursa Major supplied the numerical figure of plenty. Thus there are 2 kinds of motherhoods that have to be most carefully discriminated one from the other. The first is human. The last is superhuman. The human mother might be represented by or as the totemic cow, serpent, frog, or vulture. Nevertheless, they were not human mothers who were divinized in those same likenesses as the Egyptian goddesses Isis, Ranut, Hecate, and Neith. But the human mother who was eaten at the sacramental meal did supply a type of the superhuman mother in external nature, who also gave herself as a voluntary sacrifice for human food and sustenance, the mother of life in death who furnished the Eucharist that was eaten in the religious mysteries. The human mother had been an actual victim, eaten as a sacrifice. The superhuman mother or goddess was eaten typically, or by proxy. Hence she who was the giver of food and life to the world came to be eaten sacramentally and vicariously, that is, in some totemic victim, by whose death her sacrifice was symbolically represented. There were different types of the sacrificial victim at different stages of the Eucharist. At one stage it was the red calf as the type of Horus, the child. At another it was Osiris as the bull or ox. The victim, speaking in the Book of the Dead, exclaims, "I am the bull of the sacrificial herd," who identifies his body with the mortuary meal. But in Egypt the Great Mother was eaten as the cow that represented the goddess Hathor or Isis, also as the sow which represented the goddess Sod or Re-Rit, 2 of the types that were figures of the Great Mother who thus gave her body and blood for human food that was eaten as a voluntary sacrifice of her own maternal self. Herodotus notwithstanding, the cow had been a type of sacrifice in Egypt. Moreover, it was the red cow or red heifer, the same as in the Hebrew ritual. As already shown, the mother types and totems were primary, and the red cow was a type of the blood mother from the time when she was the red water cow of the first mother Apt, who was succeeded by Hathor, as the milch cow. It is sometimes difficult to distinguish between the human mother in totemism and the great mother in mythology, because the same types were employed for both. Besides which, as Earth was the bringer forth of all living things, she was also a mother to the human race in common with the other forms and elements of life. For instance, as the bringer forth of life she was the mother of animal food, the giver of grass seed, of tubers and plants in the soil, and of food in the fruitful tree. As the crocodile, the serpent, the goose, the emu, or the witchetty grub, she was the layer of the egg, and thus a mother to be ultimately divinized as the great mother who was superhuman. In the Kamite mythology, Apt, the hippopotamus, Re-Rit, the sow, Neith, the crocodile, Ranut, the serpent, Wadi, the papyrus, Hathor, the fruit tree, Isis, the field. The human mother was the suckler of her children. This image of maternity was likewise given to the earth as the nursing mother, who was the giver of liquid life in water. But the earth, as wet nurse or layer of the egg for food, could not be so directly rendered. Hence the need of sign language. In the mythical representation, page 98, of superhuman phenomena, the human mother had brought forth her children in the forest and from the cave in the rock, in consequence of which, as natural fact, the tree and the hole in the stone, or the ground, have each continued ever since to represent the human birthplace in the image of the female figured as the superhuman mother, the great Mother Earth. It was not the human mother that was the object of worship or of propitiation with the offering of blood. This was the typical mother, the great or pregnant mother, the mother of food and sustenance, the mother who for ages on ages was not imaged in the human shape because she was superhuman. In modern phraseology, the primitive seekers after God were seekers after food and drink and physical sustenance. The giver of these elements was the earth itself, or herself, when depicted in the image of the mother as the nurse of life. Nothing simpler has been recovered from the past than the religious system of the Arrernte tribes of Central Australia, who, in their sacred rites, are self-portrayed as seekers after food. An important ceremony, that was designed to bring success in kangaroo hunts, consisted in the letting of blood. Thus, the blood was an offering to secure plenty of food. Nt. Page 193, note, in certain of the Antiquiama ceremonies blood is poured out freely as an offering on behalf of food. These ceremonies are performed for the purpose of ensuring the increase of the animal or plant which gives its name to the totem, the emu, the beetle, the kangaroo, or others. The blood was poured out on the earth as an oblation to the Earth Mother, even though she was only represented by the emu bird. The earliest religion, so to call it, was a cultus of the mother who was propitiated as the only one who was in the beginning. This was the primal providence or provider as the Great Mother, the Mother Earth, who was invoked with offerings of blood for food and drink. In Egypt she was given several characters. She was Abt, Ket, or Ta-ert. The hippopotamus-headed, Re-rit, or Sot, the many-teated So, Hathor, the cow, Ranut, the serpent woman, and others related to the phenomena of external nature as the source of life, of food and water. The root of the whole matter was fecundity, and the goddess, who in later times was called the mother of love in Egypt, originated in the giver of plenty as the goddess of fecundity. But the fecundity at first was that of earth, the provider of food and drink. Hence, she was imaged by the suckler who gave the image of life as Sot the sow, or Hathor the cow. At this stage that which has been so often generalized by the phrase phallic worship was propitiation of what we call Mother Nature equals Mother Earth divinized, or idealized as superhuman in the likeness of the large-uddered cow or the multi-mammalian sow, which were figures in a cult of fecundity, the first and foremost object of the worship being the food and drink that were supplied by the Mother Earth who gave her life in sacrifice that men might live. The Mother Earth, Dirtima, is still the primordial deity with the Baiga tribes of Sini, India. They offer food to her as provider at every meal before they call on any other god or, page 99, goddess. With the Babylonians Nin-ki-gal, the Great Lady, is another form of the Earth Mother. As Miss Kingsley shows, this primitive Earth Mother of African origin still survives in Africa as the Earth Goddess Nzambi. The Great Mother. There is something that shows the stage of the beginning is still extant as inner African, from which the thought and symbolism of Egypt were developed. In her account of fetish, according to different schools, Miss Kingsley tells us the Earth Goddess Nzambi is the paramount feature in the fetishistic religion. She is the Great Mother. Round her circle almost all the legends, in her lies the ultimate human hope of help and protection, or, in modern phrase, salvation. Kingsley, M. H. West. African Studies, pages 154 and 155. Previously the same writer had said the school of Nkisi is mainly concerned with the worship of the mystery of the power of earth, Nkisinsi. Now the mystery of the power of earth, or Nkisinsi, as Egyptian, is expressed by the word Kep, which is a name of the old Earth Mother, Ta-ert. The word Kep signifies mystery, to be mysterious, the mystery of fermentation, the mystery of fertilization, and of water as the source of life. This is as it was in Africa from the first, and as it was in the beginning so it remained in Egypt, allowing for development, to the last. For Apt, the old first Mother Earth, survives in the eschatology of the ritual, still keeping her hippopotamus form, as the mistress of divine protections and rekindler of the light of life from the spark when it had gone out in the dark of death. Thus, she who had brought to birth as the Mother Earth lived. On as the bringer to rebirth for another life in the phase of eschatology. The old first Great Mother, then, one of whose names is Ket, was the Mother Earth in her primary character, and if we go back far enough we find the type is universal. The Mother Earth gave birthplace and food to all the children born of her. Isis, represented as the Secular field, was still the Mother Earth. With the Algonquins, Mother Earth was the great-grandmother of all. Mama Pacha, worshipped by the Peruvian tribes, was the Mother Earth. Following the pathetically primitive custom of ceremonially eating the mother in honor, as the first giver of food, a cult emerges from the darkness of the past upon the way to worship, the worship of the mother. With Young, who was the pregnant, therefore the great, mother. This was a cult of supplication, propitiation, and thankfulness for food and liquid life, which made its offerings to the Mother Earth as the provider of plenty. Mother Earth is the great mother of the Moki Indians, our grandmother with the Shawnees, and the grandmother of the Karens in Burma. Tari Penu is the Mother Earth to the Khans of Orissa. The Finnish goddess, consort of Ukko, is the Mother Earth. The Eskimo Old Mother Jagoni was the Mother Earth, Ge was the Greek Mother Earth, Ops was the Roman Earth Mother, whom we look on as a form of the Egyptian goddess Apt, or Ap. The ancient Germans worshipped Mother Herda, who is identical by name with page 100, Earth, and also with Ta-Ert, the Egyptian Mother Earth. There was a primitive kind or class of people known as Earth-born Aborigines, like the San of the Khoikhoi and the Chinese Miao Tse. These children of Earth who came forth from the forest and the cave would naturally be divided first for recognition in two categories as the children of the tree and the rock, which are spoken of by Hesiod as the two origins of mortals, both tree and rock being representatives of the earth as birthplace. This cult of the earth worshippers may account for the earth eaters, who still survive in Africa and also with the Indians of California. The tradition is common with the people of several countries that they issued originally from the ground. But to restore the lapsed meaning we have to read earth for ground, and then identify the earth with one of her types as the mother of all, who is the great mother in mythology. According to S. Powers, the Californian Indians think that their prairie dog ancestors were molded directly from the soil. If so, they have lost the clue which survives in mythology. The coyote as a burrower in the ground is a type of the Mother Earth that was made the totem of the Coyote Indians. The birth of the human race from the Mother Earth is indicated both directly and indirectly in the legends of the Kaffirs. In these men issued from the ground, from the cleft in the rock, or a bed of reeds. Others say that Unkulunkulu split them out of a stone. It is still said of a great chief by the Zulus that he was not born, he was belched up by a cow. The cow, like the cloven stone, or the tree, was a female type of the Mother Earth. Thus represented, the earth becomes a rock, from which issued the race of men, or in the words of Isaiah, it is the rock whence they were hewn, ch. Lee. And the whole of the pit from whence they were digged. Also, as the rock was a type of the earth, the Great Mother, we can see how and wherefore in a following stage the stone pillar or the whole stone should become a figure of the mythical Genetrix as it was of Hathor and the Paphian Venus, and why the stone seat should be an emblem of the Earth Mother Isis as a figure of foundation. With the Bushman the Earth Mother has become the typical old woman of later language. Earth as the superhuman mother is denoted in the Quiche legend in which it is said the human race descended from a cave-dwelling woman or female. Cave, pit, and cavern were the uterus, so to say, of Mother Earth as the place of coming forth, the Unu, or opening of Nath, the Unane of Hathor as the solar birthplace. Very naturally the mount was typical of Mother Earth in which the cave was a place of birth for man and beast. The citizens of Mexico and those of Chalatalolco were wont to visit a hill called Cacatepec, because, as they said, it was their mother. Bancroft Molina states that the principal sacred place or waka of the Mexican Incas was that of the hill Huanacorai, from whence their ancestors were held to have commenced their journey. Spencer. Data of Sociology, ch. 24. Page 186. The mount with the cave in it was a natural figure of the Mother Earth to the troglodytes who were born and there came to consciousness. When the Navajos, page 101, issued from the womb, euphemistically from the bowels, of a great mountain near the San Juan River. That mountain is an image of the Mother Earth. The Oneida, Ojibwe, and Dakota Indians, who claim derivation from a sacred stone, at the same time trace their descent from the mountain of the race. Naturally, the cave as birthplace of the Earth Mother was identified with the uterine abode. We might say, identified by it, that is by the emblem scrawled upon the rock from time immemorial. This figure, or similitude of the female, called the symbol of wickedness in all the land by Zechariah, ch. 5:8. Portrayed through all the world, has ever been most prominent in the primitive art of the Aborigines from Africa to Australia. Not as an object of worship, nor of degradation, but as a likeness of the human abode. Depicted in the birthplace of the cavemen. The superhuman type of the motherhood appears in symbolism as the cleft, the gap, the cave, as well as the tree, the sow, the water cow, crocodile, lioness, and other zootypes. The human mother comes into view by means of her emblem, the hieroglyphic ru or door of life in the divinized motherhood as the Vasica Pisces of later iconography. There is no getting outside of nature, either in the beginning or in the end. With the Arranta tribes of Central Australia, a gorge among the hills at some local totem center is identified as the place of emanation from the Earth Mother. This is exactly in keeping with the gorge of Nath, whence issued the younglings of Shu, as spirits of breathing force. Local tradition tells that at the Emily Gap, near to Alice Springs, certain Witchetty grubs became transformed into Witchetty men, NT, page 123. Otherwise stated, the elemental souls passed into the mothers of that ilk to be specialized in the human form, instead of becoming animal, bird, or reptile. If we take Hathor as the abode of birth, that is, the Mother Earth as the birthplace and the bringer forth of life, the stone or conical pillar of Hathor was a type of this birthplace. Now, let us turn for a moment to the Erathapa stone of the Arranta for the proof that the stone with an opening in it was a totem of the Mother Earth, the stone out of which the Zulus say the human race was split in the beginning. There is no mistaking the nature of the Arranta stone. It is a representative image of the mother in the very simplest form. According to the tradition, spirit children issue from a hole in the Erathapa stone. Over this aperture a black band is painted with charcoal. This completes that figure of the female which has been portrayed in all the earth as a symbol of the human mother applied to her, who was externalized as the superhuman mother, the primeval birthplace. The Fijian pillar stones were girdled round the waist with the primitive cestus or liku of hair, to typify pubescence and identify the motherhood. It is common for the tree to be draped in female attire and hung with feminine ornaments. As when the Israelite women wove hangings for the Asherah. Two female figures of stone and wood are to be found not only in the Arranta Churinga, but at the head of all human descent and all the stock and stone worship of the world. They are recognized by Homer when Penelope says to Ulysses, "Tell me thy lineage," and when, page 102, "Thou art, for thou dost not spring from the ancient tree nor from the rock." Otis 19, 163, meaning that he must be an immortal, whereas these are two types of an origin that is of the earth. Hesiod also, Theog 30, 35, speaks of the tree and rock as being amongst the mysteries of the beginning pertaining to the ever-living, ever-blessed immortals. The earlier name of the chief sanctuary in Israel, called Bethel, was Luz, or the almond tree. Bethel was the place of the stone pillar, as the abode of the god, and Luz, the locality of the tree. These, we repeat, are two primary and universal types of the feminine abode, represented by the two women in Australia and the two divine sisters in Egypt. They are classed together also as objects of abhorrence in the later casting out of the primitive types. Woe unto them that saith to the wood awake, to the dumb stone, arise. In the making of idols, Hab 2. 19. The stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Hab 2. II. The wood and stone of the Australian Churinga, which are totemic types, are excommunicated in Israel as idols when they were no longer understood as symbols. They came to be looked upon as deities in themselves, set up for worship. Both Caesar and Lucanus state that the gods of the Gauls were pillar stones and tree trunks. Nevertheless, these were not the gods. In Egypt both the pillar and tree were pedestals for the gods, and both were blended in the tree pillar, or tat of Ptah. As images of the mother both were the Beth or abode, as bringer forth of the divinity or spirit which was the object of worship, as was the God of Jacob in the conical pillar and of Horus in the tree. These two primordial and universal types of origin are coupled together in Logion v. Of the lambda omicron gamma iota alpha iota eta c cedilla omicron upsilon, page 12. Raise the stone, and there thou shalt find me, cleave the wood, and there am I. To raise the stone is to erect an altar. The wood is one with the tree. The stone was raised and the tree prepared for worship. Because they were types of the divine abode, which represented the two women or sisters who were the two mothers or bringers forth of the race in the beginning. The perception that life was born of the earth must have been as primordial as it was natural, and that which brings to birth is the mother. Thus, the race of human beings, in common with the animals, was born of Mother Earth. In Central Africa the natives claim that they came from a hole in the rock, Duff MacDonald. It is indeed a common African tradition. The stone or rock crops up continually as an emblem of the earth or solid ground. The earth itself was brought to a point and focused in the ceremonial stone on which the offering was made. For instance, when the members of the Heka flower totem perform their mystery to solicit food, one of the young men opens a vein in his arm and lets the liquid flow over the ceremonial stone until it is entirely covered with blood. A rock near Guam, in the Martian Islands, is locally regarded as the ancestor of the human race. The African birthplace denoted by the rock of earth and the forest tree is indicated by the tradition of the Ovaherero, which relates that men were born from the Omumbra manga tree, and that sheep and goats issued from a flat rock. Reiderbeck, Reverend H., Missionary Labors, page 263, now, the great goddess who was worshipped with the Gori, page 103, writes of many lands originated as the Mother Earth who was fertilized with blood, and with the definite object of procuring food. This was the superhuman mother who gave her own life in food, and to whom blood was offered as a propitiatory sacrifice for sustenance. Also in this rite the blood was poured out freely on the earth itself, as life for life. The Antikyma ceremonies of the Arenta amply show that human blood was poured out on the earth as a sacrificial offering for food. Plenty of blood was shed for plenty of food. It was a mode of magical invocation that is still practiced in the mysteries of black magic for the evocation of spirits. Food was the supreme object sought by primitive folk, and the giver of food and drink was propitiated and besought for more. This was naturally the Mother Earth, the mother in the water, in the tree, in the animals that were eaten. Hence the Antikyma ceremonies of the Arenta are still performed for the increase of the animal or plant which gives its type, or name, to the totem. The sole object of these ceremonies is that of increasing the total food supply. Native tribes, page 169, the Arenta of the emu totem pour out their blood lavishly upon the earth in asking for plenty of emu, an image of which is painted on the ground to be deluged with blood. On the other hand, the men of the Wicheti Grub totem, in praying for food, will paint their totem on the body of each man in red ochre, which is a local substitute for blood. Then they represent the mystery of transformation, from matter to spirit, from death to life, and await the emergence of the fully developed insect from the cocoon of the chrysalis, NT, pages 175 and 176. In the one case blood was offered actually, in the other symbolically, but in both it was offered for continuance and increase of food. Thus the Antikyma ceremony is a festival celebrated for the increase of food, especially of the totem that was eaten solemnly at the Thanksgiving meal. Also the corroboree of promiscuous intercourse takes place at this festival of invocation for plenty of food. And the drama of reproduction is humanly enacted, as it were, in aid of production in external nature. The blood of the martyrs was not only the seed of the church in later ages, the flesh and blood of the victim offered in sacrifice were also buried in the earth as seed for the future harvest. In West Africa it was a custom for a man-arid woman to be killed with spades and hoes in the month of March, and for their bodies to be buried in the middle of a newly tilled field to secure a better crop. The Marimos, a Bechuana tribe, offer up a human victim for the welfare of their crops. The man chosen for a sacrifice is taken to the field and slain amongst the wheat, according to their phrase, to serve as seed. The custom was not only African. The Pawnee Indians offered the flesh and blood of a sacrificial victim at the time of seed sowing. As late as the year 1837 a captive Sioux girl was sacrificed by them at the time of planting the maize. The flesh was torn in morsels to be buried in the earth, and the corn was sprinkled with drops of her propitiating blood. The appeal for food and drink was natural and universal. According to the ancient wisdom, this appeal was made to the Mother Earth as the source of life, who was imaged as the giver of sustenance in various forms, but first and foremost as the superhuman suckler, the sow, the water cow, or milch cow. Page 104, Egypt has registered the permanent proof that a superhuman power was first besought for food and drink in the person of the Great Mother. The human mother who was eaten sacramentally had supplied the type for the Great Mother in mythology. The sacrifice was offered to the goddess on the hilltop, on the altar stone, in the field or granary, or under the green tree, as these were different types of the Earth Mother. The palm tree that is being fecundated on the Mesopotamian monuments represents the Mother Earth as source of food, one form of which is the produce of the tree. The tree is female. The cone held in the hand of the genie is an emblem of the male, or solar power by which the earth is fertilized. Earth is the mother of food, the universal matrix. The tree is but a type, like other representatives of the bringer forth. The sacrifice portrayed beneath the tree upon the Hindu monuments is frankly phallic. Under whatsoever type or name, the so-called tree worship or phallic worship is a festival of fertilization, celebrated in propitiation of the earth goddess, who is the genitrix besought for food and sustenance, and blood was the primitive oblation made to the Mother Earth. This, however, was not the only one, as is shown by the invocatory rites. The ancient mother still survives amongst the Western Lenoites in the same primeval character of Mother Earth, she who is the bringer of food, and who when in a merry mood will play at raining down melted fat. In her capacity of the Great Mother who is pregnant with plenty, and who is designated Mother Plenty. We are not likely to get much nearer to primitive nature than amongst these Eskimo who still perform the mystery of generation and celebrate their Arctic agape at the annual festival of fecundity. In one of the scenes the shamans enact the resurrection of life as the reproduction of food. The prey is hunted to death with savage cries. Whilst fleeing from the pursuers, the man in a mask, who acts the part of the animal, seizes hold of a brand from the fire and hurls it aloft to the roof, so that when it falls back to the ground it throws out a shower of live sparks. What does this portend? Asks for clue. The answer is that, surrounded as it is by its persecutors, the quarry forgets its danger to reproduce its species, an exploit which all the spectators greet with acclamation. It is not enough to kill the prey, it must also reproduce itself, so that its race may not die out or food become scarce. This festival was universal once. It was celebrated all over the world as a drama of reproduction, first and foremost for the reproduction of food. The resurrection of food by reproduction in animal life is thus enacted at the Lenoit Festival, as it has been acted in 100 other mysteries, in Tikiama, Eucharists, corroborees, and religious revels. By the dim glimmer of this distant light we see the victim's death was followed with the act of a begettal to new life. It was a drama of reproduction in which the sacrificial victim from the first had represented food, the new food of another year, or of another life in the religious mysteries. It was, we repeat, a drama of reproduction, in which the victim that died and was eaten as the Eucharist was symbolically reproduced in the corroboree that followed. From very early times the sacrifice of a victim was solemnized, page 105, and followed by the phallic feast, whether in the corroboree of the Arenta or the Christian agape. First, the sacrificial victim is slain and eaten, ante lucem, at the evening meal or last supper, and next the festival of reproduction was celebrated in the agape. This reproduction was performed by universal promiscuity from a time when paternity was impersonal and the relationship of the sexes was that of all for all, when boundless license was the only law befitting the Great Mother. This promiscuity is also recognizable when Tertullian repeats the charges that were brought against the conduct of the Christians at their festivals, dicemur scleritissimi de sacramento infanticidii et pabulo ond, et post, incesto. Convivium quod ever sors luminum. The ancient mother still survives amongst the Western Lenoites in the same primeval character of Mother Earth, she who is the bringer of food, and who when in a merry mood will play at raining down melted fat. In her capacity of the Great Mother who is pregnant with plenty, and who is designated Mother Plenty. We are not likely to get much nearer to primitive nature than amongst these Eskimo who still perform the mystery of generation and celebrate their Arctic agape at the annual festival of fecundity. In one of The scenes the shamans enact the resurrection of life as the reproduction of food. The prey is hunted to death with savage cries. Whilst fleeing from the pursuers, the man in a mask, who acts the part of the animal, seizes hold of a brand from the fire and hurls it aloft to the roof, so that when it falls back to the ground it throws out a shower of live sparks. What does this portend? Asks Reclus. The answer is that, surrounded as it is by its persecutors, the quarry forgets its danger to reproduce its species, an exploit which all the spectators greet with acclamation. It is not enough to kill the prey, it must also reproduce itself, so that its race may not die out or food become scarce. This festival was universal once. It was celebrated all over the world as a drama of reproduction, first and foremost for the reproduction of food. The resurrection of food by reproduction in animal life is thus enacted at the Lnoit festival, as it has been acted in 100 other mysteries, Intikiama, Eucharists, corroborees, and religious revels. By the dim glimmer of this distant light we see the victim's death was followed with the act of a begettal to new life. It was a drama of reproduction in which the sacrificial victim from the first had represented food, the new food of another year, or of another life in the religious mysteries. It was, we repeat, a drama of reproduction, in which the victim that died and was eaten as the Eucharist was symbolically reproduced in the corroboree that followed. From very early times the sacrifice of a victim was solemnized, page 105, and followed by the phallic feast, whether in the corroboree of the Arenta or the Christian agape. First, the sacrificial victim is slain and eaten, ante lucam, at the evening meal or last supper, and next the festival of reproduction was celebrated in the agape. This reproduction was performed by universal promiscuity from a time when paternity was impersonal and the relationship of the sexes was that of all for all, when boundless license was the only law befitting the Great Mother. This promiscuity is also recognizable when Tertullian repeats the charges that were brought against the conduct of the Christians at their festivals, dicemur scleritissimi de sacramento infanticidii et pabulo ond, et post, incesto. Convivium quod ever sors luminum. We now come to the secondary cause of what has been called phallic worship. The first we found in Earth herself being imaged and propitiated as the Great Mother in the pre-anthropomorphic mold when she was represented by the water cow, the sow, the goose, or other figure of food. Long before the god Seb was divinized as the father of food, the earth was mother of food and gave drink as the wet nurse, with the sow as suckler of her children, and the cave in the rock as her womb. The goddess Hathor, the Egyptian Venus, was the fairest representative of Mother Earth. She was propitiated as the mother of plenty, like the Lnoit Cid, and was imaged in the likeness of the cow or sow, as the figure of food and fecundity. She was also the goddess of generation, maternity, and childbirth, as well as of music and the dance, of loveliness and love. Length of time and the course of development have to be allowed for. The Greek Venus in her nudity is immeasurably distant from the goddess Hathor offering her milk to the glorified. Nevertheless, the mother of food was primary as Mother Earth, and the goddess of love explains the phallic nature of the later cult of fertilization. The most exact and comprehensive title for the religion designated phallic worship would be the cult of the Great Mother, taking Hathor for the type, who was the womb of life as Mother Earth, the suckler as the cow, the giver of food, shelter, and water as the tree, and who in the course of time became the goddess of love, of fecundity and childbirth. Moreover, in the later phallic cult the type had been changed from the cow to the human female. The primitive simplicity of Hathor worship was just that of the infant pulling and mumbling at the mother's nipples, when the source of milky plenty was portrayed as superhuman in the likeness of the cow or sow, and when the representation became anthropomorphic. This simplicity was lost. The cow or sow was superseded by the woman in the temples as the more alluring type of the great goddess. It is most naively pitiful to see how the sex became the human organ of the superhuman power, offering itself as Hathor in the Asherah tree or as the house of God, acting the goddess as the great harlot of the cult in its debasement and deterioration. This, we repeat, was mainly a result of the representation becoming anthropomorphic. The Great Mother was the ideal in the minds of the devotees. She whose size had been imaged by the hippopotamus, whose sexual force had been represented, page 106, by Sekhet as the lioness in heat. Thus, when the type was humanized, the female of the greatest capacity would present the nearest likeness to the divinity, and be held most worthy of her at the festival. Of fertilization. The Great Mother, when represented in the human form, becomes the harlot of promiscuous intercourse who brought much revenue to the religious house by her capacity for performing the rite on behalf of the Great Mother in her tree tent or rock cave, or later sanctuary. Carver, in his travels, relates that when amongst the Naudauces he saw they paid uncommon respect to one of their women, who was looked up to, if not worshipped, as a person of high distinction, because on one occasion she invited 40 of the principal warriors to her tent, provided them with a feast, and treated them all as her husbands. This, the Indians said, was an ancient custom by which a woman might win a husband of the first rank. Lubbock, Origin of Civilization, page 101, she, like the water cow, would be a type of the Great Mother, or goddess of fecundity, represented by the woman capable of entertaining all the males of the totem at one time as the Great Mother indeed. It was as representatives of the Great Mother that the temple prostitutes attained preeminence in various lands, and afterwards were highly honored as the servants of the goddess. The Great Mother in the Mount was represented by such goddesses as Astarte, whose Ephebi and courtesans received her devotees in grottos and caves that were hollowed out for the purpose in the Syrian hillsides. The Temple of Hathor at Sarabit el-Khadim, discovered by Professor Petrie in the peninsula of Sinai, was based originally on a cave in the rock, which was the Great Earth Mother's earliest shrine. In England there is or used to be a mild return to sexual promiscuity once a year. The confusion or mingling on the mound was practiced on the hill, though not in a very Belialistic way. In the present writer's youth it was an Easter pastime for the lads and lasses to meet upon the beacon, the steps, or some other sacred hill equivalent to the mound, and kiss and romp and roll each other down the hillside in a scene of fine confusion, and with much soiling and tearing at times of pretty frocks that had to be put on quite new for the Saturnalia. All young folk were sweethearts in a kind of sexual promiscuity on Easter Day. In its way this was a form of the phallic festival and the return to promiscuity that was celebrated at the time of year when a reproduction of the fruits of the earth was dramatized and all the inimical influences that made for sterility, drought, and famine were figuratively driven away. As Herodotus relates, some 700,000 people used to assemble at Bubastis to celebrate the annual festival of the Great Mother Bast, who was known as the goddess of strong drink and sexual passion. The women who exposed their persons on the boats to the watchers on the shore were exhibiting the natural lure to signify that they were free to all comers, for this occasion only, in the service of the goddess, who was a lioness in heat. They were going to celebrate the great festival of reproduction. He says that when the barges passed the riverside towns some of the women danced on board, others stood up and exposed their persons to those who were watching them from the banks of the Nile. B. 2,60. The phallic festival was periodically celebrated in honor of the Great Mother, the first supreme power in nature personalized as the goddess of fertility, the giver of food and drink, the celebration being in accordance with primitive usage and the promiscuous sexual intercourse of pre-totemic times. The phallic festivals were chiefly repeated at the equinoxes, that is, at seed time and harvest. The equinox was a figure of equality and of all things being on a level. This fact is expressed in the names of our fairs and evens. Promiscuity was a mode of making things fair and even in the sexual saturnalia. High and low, rich and poor, young and old, commingled on the mound, the hill, the high places. It was a world in which old maids and bachelors were not allowed, and there was at most a 6 months lease for private ownership in womankind, from one equinox to the other. Hence we learn from the witches' confessions that women were the strongest supporters of the Sabbath. Laws of taboo were violated with impunity for this occasion only. At this time, and no other, men and women of the same totem cohabited promiscuously. The Asherah is a sacred simulacrum of the goddess whose desire was to be forever fecundated. And when the women of Israel set up the Asherah and wore the hangings for curtains of concealment, 2 Kings 23:7, they became the representatives of the Great Mother who is denounced by the biblical writers as the Great Harlot, but who was a most popular mother in Israel, and second her own second self in Egypt. There is every reason for concluding that the unlimited excess indulged in promiscuously at the phallic festival was designed to represent the desire for an illimitable supply of food, the boundlessness of the one being dramatically rendered by the latitude and license of the other. It was a magical mode of the mysteries in which the meaning was expressed in act as a primitive form of sign language addressed to the superhuman power as the Great Mother. The customs of the savage, or, as we prefer to say, the Aborigines, are modes of memorizing. For ages on ages their only means of keeping an historic record of the past, the sole mode of memorial, have been the customs, and with what faithful persistence these have been fulfilled. Promiscuous connubium is recognized by the Arenta as the condition that obtained in the remotest times. They connect it with the custom of exchanging wives at the corroboree, saying this was the practice in the Alcharinga, NT, pages 96 and 99. That was in the time beyond which nothing is, or can be known, because nothing was formulated in the lawless state of utter promiscuity. How it relates that on one occasion, when the aurora australis was more alarming and portentous in appearance than usual, the Kurnai tribe beheld it with great terror, and betook themselves to intersexual communism by the exchange of wives as a mode of warding off the calamity supposed to be impending. How it on some Australian beliefs. The root origin, then, of what has been called the phallic religion is also to be traced in a periodic celebration of the festival of reproduction, which was first applied to the renewal of food in the flesh of animals and the fruits of the earth, this reproduction being rendered in the grossest human guise on the hugest scale, and in the most prodigious manner befitting the Great Mother in communal connubium. Page 108, with all her sons together. The festival of fertilization is a survival from the far-off past when the Mother Earth was the all and the only one, to be propitiated as the giver of food. Being the mother, she was represented by the female, who was at first prehuman, and finally human. Thenceforth woman was the living type of the mythical Great Mother, instead of the cow or sow, the goat or the she-bear, and at this festival all womankind were one in imaging the mother who from the beginning had been the Aeone. Nothing was recognized but the female, the typical organ of motherhood, which imaged the earth as mother of sustenance, the mother, who was propitiated and solicited in various ways, by oblations of blood and other offerings, was a one so invoked in the likeness of the human female to be fertilized in human fashion. She was the Great Mother, the All-One, and nothing less than the contributions of all could duly, hugely, adequately represent the oblation. In Drummond's Oedipus Judaicus, Pi. 13, there is a drawing from the Mithraic monuments according to Hyde, which shows that the seed sowing at the festival of fertilization was illustrated in the human fashion by the male, and that the earth goddess was fecundated as the female, who was represented by the women in the orgy of promiscuity. The mystery of reproduction was acted in the festival, as the vicarious mode of fecundating the Great Mother and Good Lady, by the bountiful sowing of human seed. It was a primitive mode of representing her, on behalf of whom all womankind contributed vicariously. Call it worship, phallic worship, or any other worship. The supreme object of devotion at first was food and drink, which were represented by the earth and crop, the tree and fruit, the animal pregnant with young, by the mammalia, the water cow, the sow, the milch cow, the goose, the emu, the kangaroo, and lastly by the goddesses and the women who represented Mother Earth as Apt or Isis, Nin-Ki-Gal or Demeter, when the latter had been objectified in Hathor, the goddess of love, or Sekhet, the goddess of sexual communion, as divinity in female form. As it is said of Pepi in the texts, thy sister Isis hath come to thee rejoicing in thy love. Thou hast had intercourse with her, and hast made her to conceive. Budge, Book of the Dead, Introduction, page 134, in these celebrations the woman took the place of the goddess. At the time when the begetters were not yet individualized, a single pair of actors would have conveyed but little meaning. The soul of procreation was tribal, general, promiscuous, and the mode of reproduction in the most primitive mysteries was in keeping therewith. Reproduction by the soul of the tribe was rendered by all the members contributing to fecundate the Great Mother. Hence the phallic saturnalia, in which the reproduction of food, especially in the future life of the animals, and the continuation of the species were dramatized in a primitive phallic festival which survived eventually as the love feast of the Christian cult. Many examples could be cited of this custom, which was universal as it was primitive, and which may be looked upon as the festival of reproduction that represented the begettal of future food in human fashion. And in connubium as it were with the Great Mother, the Mother Nature, or the Mother Earth, like Pepi with his, page 109, Divine Sister Isis. In India today young girls are married to the gods. The doctrine is the same in the Roman cult when the virgins are the dedicated brides of Christ. In the earlier rite it was the males who, like the pharaoh Pepi, were married to the Divine Mother who was personated by the women in the mysteries of the primitive religion. At such a time, whatsoever their status attained in civilization, the people lapsed pro tem into a state of general promiscuity. The women lost all feeling of modesty and became raging Bacchants. Men and women were more furious than animals in the indulgence of their passion at this wild debauch. As described by M. Reclus, divinized Mother Earth had to he stirred from her winter sleep by naively lascivious spectacles for the purpose of exciting the spirit of fecundity. She was represented by young wantons of women, who danced and frolicked indescribably or lay down and scraped the ground with their heels, caressed it with their hands, and offered their embraces like so many naked Damias wooing the fertilizing sun. In this Saturnalia there was a general reversion to the practice of an earlier time somewhat analogous to the throwback of atavism in race, with this difference, the intentional lapse in moral status was but temporary, although periodically recurrent. It was a stripping off, or rather bursting out, of all the guises and disguises, trappings, ties, and stays of civilization, and running amok in all the nudity of nature. There is a pathos of primitive simplicity in some of the appeals thus made in the lower ranges of the cult that is unparalleled in literature. The Tatagars of southern India, at the festival of sowing seed, will insist that their wives shall make themselves common to all comers as an incitement for the Mother Earth to follow their example. The husbands improvise shelters by the roadside and stock them with provisions for their wives, and call upon the passers-by to procure the public good and ensure an abundance of bread. Reclus p. F. p. page 283. A propos of this same festival, Israel is charged by Hosea with having become a prostitute by letting herself out for hire upon the corn floor. Thou hast gone a whoring from thy God, thou hast loved hire upon every corn floor, ch. 9. In this case the harlot was a representative of the Mother Earth as goddess of corn who was being fertilized by proxy on the grand scale in the phallic festivities, which included connubium upon the corn floor, as well as on the hill, under the green tree, or in the embrace of the earth itself. Phallic religion, then, as here maintained, did not originate in a worship of the human sex. The Great Mother, pregnant with plenty, was the object of propitiation and appeal, as the bringer to birth and the giver of food. This was the superhuman mother in mythology, and not the human parent, as in totemism. Phallic worship originated in the cult of the motherhood. It was the mother who was honored, her body and blood were sacredly eaten in the primitive Eucharist, if not as an act of adoration, it was an act of primitive homage and affection. The type was then applied to Mother Earth as the giver of life, of food and drink, the Great Mother in mythology who was thus fertilized and fecundated as it were dramatically in the human fashion for increase of food. The drama of reproduction also involved the mystery of resurrection, page 110, and rebirth applied to the periodic renewal of food which was represented in character by the victim. Reproduction was represented in various modes of resurrection including the dance. It was a common custom for the skin of the animal, bird, or reptile to be preserved entire and suspended on a pole as the sign of reproduction for another life. This might be the skin of the Ainu bear, who is invoked to come back soon into an Ainu, whilst being offered up as a sacrifice. They then rejoice and sing, and both sexes dance in ranks as bears. Judging from other forms of the primitive agape, we surmise that what is meant by the sexes dancing in ranks as bears is that the performers at this festival couple together in the skins of the bear for the reproduction of their future food, which in this case was the bear, but elsewhere might be the buffalo, the bull, the boar, or other totemic animal that was slain and eaten sacramentally. The resurrection acted in the mysteries of Amenta still continues, the totemic type when the reproducer is Osiris, the bull of eternity. It was the same festival of reproduction when the goat was the sacrificial type as when it was the bear, or calf, or iamb, or other zootype that was eaten, food being the primitive object in propitiating the superhuman power. It was the mystery of reproduction and renewal of the animal for future food, whether this were the bear, the bull, the goat, the turtle, or any other totemic type. The secret of the mystery is that food was the object of the festival of reproduction, and the Great Mother was propitiated for abundance of food. Sexual intercourse was known to be a mode of reproduction, and the performers not only danced in totemic guise as animals, they acted the characters. In this mad festival of fertilization for the production of food, men also dressed and acted as women, women dressed and acted as men, the function of each being thus apparently doubled. We know that in the totemic mysteries the performers wore the skins of animals as a mode of acting in character, and when they acted thus in pairs, it would inevitably give rise to statements that men and animals commingled in dark rites without distinction of nature. Now, the goat was a Jewish type, totemic or religious, and the Jews were reputed to be goat worshippers after the animal had been made a symbol of the evil suit in Egypt. But the goat was at one time good, as a giver of food in flesh and milk, when those of the totem would dance in the skin of the goat and be denounced by later ignorance as worshippers of the Shadim or of Satan. Thus, amongst the mysteries that were continued by the primitive Christians is this of reproduction, which was first applied to food and finally to the human soul. Hence they were charged with running after heifers, just as the Jews were denounced for running after she-goats. The root of the whole matter is that in this festival of fructification the animals which are eaten for food are represented by the totemic actors in the skins as reproducing themselves for food hereafter. The fact is disclosed by the Inuit ceremony in which the prey must reproduce itself before the sacrificial victim dies, so that the species shall live on in future. Food may be secured. The mystery was the same the wide world round. The early Christians had to be admonished against running after heifers in their mysteries performed at Christmas and on other days. This was the survival, page 111, of a primitive custom that, like all others, had its genesis in the nature that was blindly groping in the gloom with dark religious rites. The fact was patent in all the mysteries that promiscuous sexual intercourse was an act which came to be called religious. The agape did not originate with what is termed Christianity, but was one of the most primitive institutions of the human race, which began as the festival of fertility when the invocation of the superhuman power was for food and sustenance addressed to the good lady, the earth goddess, the Great Mother, in her several elemental characters. It was a festival of fructification at which she was represented by the human female, the more the merrier, the primary object being future food far more than human offspring. And it was this desire that gave the touch of religious feeling to the orgy of the sexes in which the seed was sown broadcast, so to say, for future harvest. Following totemism, we find that fetishism takes up the tale of development in Sinai language. By fetishism the present writer means the reverent regard for amulets, talismans, mascots, charms, and Ayuk tokens that were worn or otherwise employed as magical signs of protecting power. Fetishism has been classified as the primal, universal religion of mankind. It has also been called the very last corruption of religion. Max Muller, Nat. Rel, page 196, but it will not help us to comprehend the position of the primitive races by simply supposing them to have been in an attitude of worship when they were only groping mentally on all fours. On the contrary, we consider the so-called fetishes to be a residual result of sign language and totemism, and do not look on fetishism as an organized religious cult. The name of fetishism was given by de Brosses, in his work on the cult of the fetish gods, published in 1760. The word fetish is said to be derived from a root which yields our word faith. Feitiço, in Portuguese, is the name for an amulet, a talisman, or magical charm. The word would seem to have been adopted by the West Coast natives and applied to their gru-grus, juju, inquisi, or maquiso, which are worn for mental medicine as the representative type of some protecting superhuman power. But fetishism did not originate with the Portuguese. Also the same root word is found in the Irish as feta. An ancient Irish wedding ring in the shape of two hands clasped together was called a feta. This too was a fetish, as a sign of fidelity or faith. The same thing was signified by the Egyptians so for the amulet or magical charm. The word sa, variously illustrated, denotes protection, aid, backing, defense, virtue, soul, efficacy. An earlier form of the word is ka. There was a divinity named Sao, or Ka, who was the god Of fetish figures which are identifiable as amulets, charms, knots, skins, and other things that were worn as types of protective power. In Egypt, So or Ka was the author or creator of the types which became fetishistic. Writ, ch. 17, nothing can be more pathetic than the appeal that was made to Sa, the god of amulets. The word Sa also signifies touch. Thus the protecting power appealed to as the god of the fetish was the god of touch. The amulet brought the power nearer to be laid hold of, and made its presence veritable to this sense. Thus, fetishism was a mode of Sinai language which supplied a tangible means of laying, page 112, hold of the nature powers that were to some extent apprehended as superhuman without being comprehended. Hence the talisman, the amulet, or magical charm is worn as something tangible, a thing to touch or clutch hold of, on purpose to keep in touch with the power represented by the fetish. This god of touch is still extant in the Church of Rome, as well as his amulets and charms, the cross, the rosary, and other fetish figures that are yet worn for protection, and are touched in time of need, to establish the physical link with the invisible power with which it may be thought desirable to keep in touch. But, it was not, as de Brosses said in his early generalization, that anything would serve promiscuously for a fetish. On the contrary, there was no fetish without some special symbolic value known to those who read these natural hieroglyphics. We see by the Zunis that one great reason for making fetish images and honoring them was that the so-called worship was a mode of laying hold upon the powers which they represented. This is common. The images are a means of taking tangible possession of the powers themselves through their hostages. The devotees thus have them in their power and hold them as it were in captivity, to control, command, and even coerce or punish them. Hence the gods were sometimes beaten in the shape of their fetish images. The appeal was not always prayerful. Certain magical formulae in the Egyptian ritual were repeated as words of command. In saluting the two lions, the double Uriai and the two divine sisters, the deceased claims to command and compel them by his magical art. 37. Magic is the power of influencing the elemental or ancestral spirits. Magical words are words with which to conjure and compel magical processes were acted with the same intent. If the process consisted in simply tying a knot, it was a mode of covenanting and establishing a bond with the object of compelling fulfillment. The fetishism of Inner Africa, with its elemental powers, its zootypology, its science of magic and mental medicine, its doctrine of transformation, its amulets and charms, came to its culmination in the typology, the mythology, the magic, the religious rites and customs of Egypt. Egypt will show us the final phase and perfect flower of that which had its rootage in the remotest past of humanity in the dark continent. Wearing the fetish as a charm, a medicine, a visible symbol of power, is common with the Negro races. Many of them delight in wearing a beltful of these around the body. If the Negro has to bear a heavier load than usual, he will clap on a fresh fetish for every pound of extra weight, thus adding to his burden by his mode of outsetting the weight, because the fetishes represent a helpful power. If he has to carry 100 pounds weight, he will want, say, half a dozen fetish images in his girdle. But if the weight be doubled, he will require a dozen fetishes to enable him to sustain it. His fetishes represent power in various forms, whether drawn from the animal world or human, whether the tokens be a tooth, a claw, a skin, a horn, hair, a root, a bone, or only a stone. They represent a stored-up power, for the Negro has faith in his fetishes, and that acts as a potent mental influence. If he has only a gree of cord, he will tie it into knots, and every knot is the sign of increase in power, page 113, according to his reckoning. When it was known what the type or fetish signified as a representative figure, it could make no direct appeal to religious consciousness, nor evoke a feeling of reverence for itself, any more than the letters of the alphabet. Mere fetishism in the modern sense only comes in with ignorance of sign language. The Aranta have an emblem in their Churinga which is a very sacred fetish. This is associated with the Al-Churinga spirits. When there is a battle, the Churinga is supposed to endow its owner with courage. So firm is their belief in this, that if two men were fighting, and one of them knew that the other carried a Churinga whilst he did not, he would certainly lose heart and without doubt be beaten. Spencer and Gillen. We know that the inner African custom of carrying a number of amulets and charms strung upon the body for protection was continued in ancient Egypt, because we see it employed in the equipment of the dead for their journey through the nether world. When the deceased enters the presence of the Typhonian powers in Amenta, he exults in being prepared with millions of charms, or fetish images, which friendly hands have buried with his body, such as the terrible eye of Horus, the beetle of transformation, the tablet of Tan, the scepter of Felspar, the buckle of stability, the Ankh cross of life, and other types of protecting power. With his fetishes outside and inside of his mummy, he exclaims, I clothe and equip myself with thy spells, O Ra. And so he faces the darkness of death in defiance of all the evil powers. Each amulet or fetish signifies some particular way of protecting, of preserving, transforming, reproducing, or renewing life, and re-establishing him forever, the sun being representative of the power that revivifies for life eternal. We learn from the chapter on bringing the charms of a person in Hades that the amulets, spells, and talismans are equivalent to the powers of the mind, heart, and tongue of the deceased. He says, I have made the gods strong, bringing all my charms to them, ch. 23. In the chapter on stopping the crocodiles that come to make the deceased lose his mind in Amenta, we see how the earlier zootypes that once represented the powers of destruction have still kept their place, and can be turned to good account by him, as when the deceased cries, back, crocodile of the west. There is an asp in my belly. There is a snake in my belly, the one being the symbol of royal supremacy, the other of transformation into new life. The primitive mode of portraying the powers in nature that were superior to the human was continued in this typology of the tomb. Thus the Manes cling to powers beyond the human, which were first represented by the natural types that have now become fetishistic, a means of claiming alliance with them and of clothing themselves in death with their shield of protection and panoply of power. In spirit life the deceased clutches at the same types that were fetishes in this life, and holds on by the same assistance. He not only clothes himself with their images as talismans and spells, he transforms into their likeness to personate their superhuman forces. Thus he can pass underground as a tortoise, a beetle, or a shrew mouse, make way through the mud or the nets as an eel, through the water as a crocodile, through the dark as a jackal, or see in it as a cat, fly swiftly as a swallow, and soar through, page 114, the air or solar fire as the golden hawk, shed his past life like the tail of the tadpole that turns frog, or slough it like the skin of the serpent. In making his passage by means of manifold manifestations he exclaims, I have flown as a hawk, I have cackled as a goose, I am the swallow, as the soul of swiftness. He runs through the zootypes which represented the powers of the soul in various stages of development, and says, I am the jackal. 2. I am the hawk. 3. I am the great fish. 4. I am the phoenix. 5. I am the serpent. 6. I am the ram. 7. I am the sun. In this passage the deceased transforms into these zootypes of the nature powers in order that he may go where the merely human faculties would fail to carry him through. He assumes their power by wearing representative images or fetishes, by impersonation of their parts and by incorporation of these potencies which are beyond the human, and therefore superhuman. Hence the exclamation, I have incorporated Horus, i.e., the youthful god who was forever reborn in phenomenal manifestation as representative of the eternal in time, in whose likeness the mortal transformed into an immortal to realize the type. The ritual contains many references to magic as a mode of transformation. The Osiris says, my mouth makes the invocation of magical charms. I pray in magical formula, 31, 2-3. That is the precise explanation of the primitive modes of invocation and evocation, I pray in magical formula. And these magical formula were acted, performed, and signified by 1,000 things that were done in place of being said, my magical power gives vigor to my flesh, 64, 27. Masters of truth, who are free from evil, living forever, lend me your forms. Give me possession of your magical charms, for I know your names, 72, 2. Chapter 64, is spoken of as a hymn that caused the reader to go into a state of ecstasy. He no longer sees, no longer hears, whilst reciting this pure and holy composition, 50, 33, which obviously points to the condition of trance that was attributed to the magical power of the formula. Hekau, great in magical words of power, is a title of Isis, who was considered the very great mistress of spells and magical incantations. It is said of her, He beneficent sister repeateth the formula and provideth thy soul with her conjurations. Thy person is strengthened by all her formula of incantation. It is the power beyond the type that goes far to account for the origin and persistence of fetishism. The African knows well enough that the power is not necessarily resident in the fetish, which fails him continually and in the times of greatest need. But his trust is in the power that is represented by the fetish, the power that never dies, and therefore is eternal. The magical incantations which accompany the gesture signs also prove that the appeal, whether in dumb show or in words, was being made to some superior superhuman force, that is, one of the elemental powers in mythology which became the goddesses and gods in the later eschatology. The hawk will show us how a fetish image was adduced from a type or sign of superhuman force. The bird in Egypt was a symbol of the Horus sun on account of its swiftness and its soaring power. It was used to signify height, excellence, spirit, victory. And just as letters are reduced ideographs, so the hawk's, page 115, foot and kite's feather will denote the power first represented by the bird itself, and as such they are worn upon the person. They are the visible signs of swiftness or upward flight, and therefore a true medicine or fetish to speed one on. Also, when superhuman powers in nature were represented by the superhuman types or zootypes, it was not that the deceased changed into an animal or bird or reptile, either in this life or the next, when he is self-assimilated to the type. When the deceased in the ritual says, I am the lion, he is clothing himself in the strength of the great power that had been represented by the lion, which might be that of Shu or of Atum Ra. The wearers of the fetish images, whether on earth or in Amenta, are affiliated or assimilated to the power beyond by means of the type, whether this is represented by wearing the whole skin or a piece of it, the horn, the hoof, the tooth, or tail of the animal, the feathers of the bird or rattle of the snake. Thus, the horn of the bull, or a portion of it, might be worn to assimilate the wearer to Osiris, the bull of eternity. An old fan hunter gave Miss Kingsley a little ivory half-moon which was specially intended to make man see bush, otherwise for her to see her way. In the Night of the Forest, Trav. Page 102. So the eye of Horus which images the moon is given to the deceased for his nightlight in the darkness of death. Horus presents the solar eye by day and Tot the lunar eye by night, writ, ch. 144, 8. The eye was an emblem of great magical and protecting power. With many of the West Coast Africans, the eyeballs of the dead, more particularly of Europeans, constitute a great medicine, fetish, or charm. Dr. Nassau told Miss Kingsley that he had known graves to have been rifled in search of them. The amulets, charms, and tokens of magical power that were buried with the Egyptian dead became fetish on account of what they imaged symbolically, and fetishistic symbolism is sign language in one of its ideographic phases. The used collar indicated being set free from the bandages and rising again from the dead in the glorified form of the Sahu mummy. The tam scepter signified union with the loved and lost. As Egyptian, one of the fetish figures buried with the dead is the sign of the corner or angle, named Neka. It is the mystical cornerstone of the Masonic builder, and a sign of building on the square, for which the symbol stands. Building on the square, or a fourfold foundation, is to build forever. Paul speaks as a Mason or a Gnostic when he makes the mystical Christ the chief cornerstone in the temple. That is builded for an habitation of God in the Spirit. F. 2, 20-22. The Ankh cross signified the life to come, that is, the life everlasting. The Shen ring imaged continuity forever, in the circle of eternity. The heart of green basalt showed that the deceased in this life was sound-hearted. The beetle Kepper typified the self-reproducing power in nature which operates by transformation according to the laws of evolution. The jackal-headed user scepter was buried as an image of sustaining power, the vertebral column of Sut or Osiris that supported the heavens. The tat, a pillar or tree trunk, was an emblem of stability and type of the god Ptah as the fourfold support of the universe. We have heard much of the savage who was able to secrete his soul in a stone, page 116, or a tree, but without the gnosis by which alone such nursery tales could be explained. Now, in one of the numerous changes made by the Osiris in Amenta, he transforms into a stone, writ, ch. 161, saying, I am the tablet of felspar. This was the Uat amulet that was placed in the tomb as a type of that which was forever green, fresh and flourishing. Equivalent to the green jade found in Neolithic graves. In this an evergreen was, so to say, made permanent in stone, and buried with the dead as a type of eternal youth. The deceased exclaims, I am the column of green felspar, writ, ch. 160, and he rejoices in the stone being so hard that it cannot be crushed or even receive a scratch, saying, if it is safe, I am safe, if it is uninjured, I am uninjured. The power of this amulet was in its impenetrable hardness, which represented eternal permanence for the soul which it imaged. One of the most sacred fetishes in Egypt was an amulet of red stone which represented the blood of Isis. That is the mother blood in theology, the blood by which salvation came to give eternal life, a sublimated form of the mother blood in totemism, which came to give the human life. Isis, moreover, is the Virgin divinized. We speak of the blood tie between mother and child. This was first figured by means of the totem, and naturally the figure became a fetish. The Egyptians, being more advanced, were able to manufacture fetishistic types like the Ankh image of life, the Tat emblem of stability, the Nefer amulet of good luck, the Scarabaeus of transformation, the serpent of eternity. It must have been a work of proud accomplishment for primitive man when first he made a string of hair or of any fibrous material and could tie a knot in it. We might say primitive woman, hers being the greater need. It is the goddess Ankh who wears the hemp stalks on her head, the goddess Nath who is the knitter divinized. The knotted tie is one of the most primitive and important of all the African fetishes to be found in Egypt. It is the gris-gris of Inner Africa. The Ankh tie itself is originally merely a piece of string called a strap. It is the sign of dress, of undress, to tie or fasten, and of linen hung up to dry. The tie in Egypt takes several forms in the Ankh, the Tet, the Sa. The Ankh denotes life. The Sa has 10 loops or ties, which in the language of signs might signify a period of 10 lunar months. The Tet tie, now a buckle, represents the blood of Isis, the saving blood, the soul of blood derived from the Virgin Mother, which was imaged in the human Horus. The tie was the earliest form of the liku or loin belt first worn by the female as the mother of life at the period that was indicated by nature for propagation and connubium. Necklaces were worn by the Egyptian women to which the tie amulet of Isis formed a pendant, and indicated her protecting power. In others the amulet suspended was the Ankh of life, or the heart, Ab. The Tat sign of stability, or the Neferu symbol of good luck. These were all fetishes that were worn to establish the personal rapport and alliance with the respective powers, which are known by name when divinized. Fetishes generally are objects held in honor as the representatives of some power that was worshipped when the feeling had attained that status. Thus a stone may be the sacred symbol of eternal duration, the frog a living symbol of the power of transformation, page 117, the serpent a symbol of the power of self-renewal, the crocodile a zootype of the power that could see when itself was unseen. The swordfish is sacred to the Negroes of Guinea. This they do not eat. But the sword when cut off and dried becomes a fetish. That is as a type of the superhuman power whose symbol is the sword. In the final phase amulets, charms, talismans, mascots, and tokens became fetishistic through being adopted and worn as visible or secret signs of some protecting power. They are as much ideographs as any others in the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and as a mode of representation they belong to the ancient language of preverbal signs. In Egypt the great first mother Apt was propitiated as the mistress of protection. And the protection was signified by types of permanence and power that were natural at first, then artificial when the horn and tooth were succeeded by the ivory that was carved into amulets and charms, which objectified the power of protection for the living or the dead. The power of Apt was portrayed in nature by the hippopotamus, and a tooth of the animal would symbolize its strength. Hence we find that figures of the animal were shaped in ivory, or stone to be worn as types of the mistress of protection. Figures of hippopotami carved out of red stone have been discovered lately in the prehistoric sites of Egypt, which were obviously intended to be worn as amulets. Thus the fetish was at first a figure of the entire animal that represented the protecting power as the superhuman mother apt, proc. S. of B. A. 22, parts 4 and 5, page 460. Afterwards the tooth, the horn. The hoof would serve to image the power when worn upon the person of the living or buried with the mummy of the dead. A tooth is one of the most primitive types of power. Lion's teeth are worn by the Congo blacks as talismans or amulets. Crocodile's teeth are worn by the Malagasy, dog's teeth by the Sandwich Islanders, tiger cat's teeth by the land Yaks, boar's teeth by the Kukis, hog's teeth by the natives of New Guinea, shark's teeth by the Maori. All these were fetish types as images of superhuman strength. When the Eskimo Njekok goes forth to battle with the evil spirits and influences inimical to man, he arms himself with the claws of bears, the beaks of birds, the teeth of foxes, and other types of the nature powers which were primarily represented by the zoo types that bequeathed these, their remains, to the repertory of fetishism. Thus the primitive inner African mode of representation was not only preserved in the wisdom of Egypt, it became eschatological in one phase just as it remained hieroglyphical in the other, and in both it was the outcome and consummation of African Sign Language. That which has been designated telepathy and the transference of thought by the Society for Psychical Research was well known amongst the aboriginal races, and that knowledge was utilized in their system of mental magic, or what the red men termed their medicine. The earliest medicine was mental, not physical, not what we term physic. The effects that were sought for had to be adduced by an influence exerted on the mind, rather than by chemical qualities found in the physics. Hence the fetishes of the black or red aborigine are his medicine by name as well as by nature. These things served, like vaccination, traction buckles, or tar water and, page 118, the Trinity, as fetishes of belief so long as that belief might last. They constituted a mental medicine, and an access of strength or spiritual succor might be derived from the thought. Belief works wonders. Hence the image of power becomes protective and assisting. It supplies a medicine, as it is termed, a medicine to the mind, and the fetishes, therefore, are properly called a medicine. Thus the earliest healing power was mental. It was the influence of mind on mind, that operated chiefly by suggestion. This was extant before the time of drugs, when mental influence was considered magical, and the man whose power was greatest was the mage or the magician. When the fetishmonger came to think that the healing or helping power resided in the fetish itself, one of two things had occurred. Either the devotee had lost sight of the original representative value of the fetish, and in his ignorance had gone blind with superstition, or it had been discovered that certain natural products did contain stimulating properties and healing virtues in themselves, and thus the medicine of physics began to supplement the more primitive mental medicine of the earlier fetishism. But the mass of fetishes do not possess their power intrinsically or inherently, they have only a representative value, which continues to make successful appeal to belief long after it has passed out of knowledge. Thus we have the fetishism of a primitive intelligence mixed up and confused with the fetishism of later ignorance. The first mental medicine was derived by laying hold of the nature powers in some typical or representative way. For example, the firestone from heaven was a sign of primary power. This was worn as a mental medicine at first, but it becomes physic at a later stage when, as with the Burmese, a cure for ophthalmia is found in the scrapings of thunderbolts or meteoric stones. A medicine of immense power for the muscles is still made by the Chinese from the bones of a tiger which have been dug up after lying some months in the earth and ground into a most potent powder, whilst the blood and liver of the same animal supplies a medicine of mighty power, i.e., to the mind that can derive it by typical transference from the tiger. It is one of the most curious and instructive studies to trace this transformation of the earliest mental medicine into actual physics. For example, the nose horn of the rhinoceros is an African fetish of the greatest potency. This represents the power of the animal, and when carried as a fetish, charm, or amulet, it is a type of the power looked upon as assisting and protecting no matter where this power may be localized mentally. The rhinoceros being a persistent representative of power in and over water, its horn would naturally typify protection against the drowning element for boatmen and sailors. In the next stage the medicine is turned into physic by the horn being ground down and swallowed as a powder. Our familiar hartshorn derived its primal potency as a mental medicine from the horn of the deer, which was adopted as a type of renovation on account of the animals having the power periodically to shed and renew its horns, and the horn itself as an emblem of renovation was a good mental medicine long before essences were extracted or drugs compounded from it in the chemistry of physics. One might point to many things that supplied the mental medicines of fetishism before they were, page 119, ground down or calcined for the physic prescribed by our learned leeches of later times, who played the same ignorant part in dealing with these leavings of the past in this department of physics that the priests have played with the sweepings of ancient superstitions with which they have so long beguiled and ignorantly doctored us. The mode of assuming power by wearing of the skin as a fetish is still extant. The skin was worn as the only genuine garment of the magician or sorcerer. As we read in the discovery of witchcraft, the wizard's outfit included a robe furred with fox skin, a breastplate of virgin parchment, and a dry thong of lion's or hart skin for a girdle. The skin also survives as a part of the insignia worn in our law courts, colleges, and pulpits, where it still serves in sign language to determine a particular status. It likewise survives as the cap and tails on the head of the clown in a less serious kind of pantomime. Some years since the present writer was making an inquiry at the Regent's Park Zoological Gardens respecting the sloughing of the serpent, when the attendant thought it was the slough of the serpent that was wanted. The writer then learned that this cast-off skin of the reptile was still sold in London as a charm, or fetish, a medicine of great potency, and that the sum of £5 was sometimes paid for one. The fetishes acquired their sacred character, not as objects of worship, but from what they had represented in sign language, and the meaning still continued to be acted when the language was no longer read. The serpent was a symbol of renewal and self-renovation from the first, and thus the slough or skin remains a fetish to the end. We are so bound up together, the past with the present, and the doctrine of development is so vitally true, that we cannot understand the significance of 1,000 things in survival which dominate or tyrannize over us today, until we can trace them back to their origin, or learn something satisfactory about their primal meaning and the course of their evolution. Many queer customs and beliefs look unreasonable and irrational now which had a reason originally, although their significance may have been lost to us. Many simplicities of the early time have now become the mysteries of later ignorance, and we are made the victims of the savage customs bequeathed by primitive or prehistoric man, now clung to as sacred in our current superstition. It was a knowledge of these and kindred matters of the ancient mysteries that once made sacred the teachers of men, whereas it is the most complete ignorance of the natural beginnings that characterizes the priestly caste today concerning the primitive customs which still survive and dominate both men and women in the fetishism, which has become hereditary now.